The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our tradecraft analysis of Pine Gap. If you missed out on that, there's a simple solution. You might want to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you can always stay caught up with us.
Dave, we covered, many subjects about the show in our last episode with the assistance of Mr. Francis Hammett, but there is some stuff we missed and some other stuff I want to talk about. I'm ready to go, so let's head back to Australia for this episode of Spies Like Us. So we're going to continue just with me and Dave for a while, because we still have other things we want to talk about the show. We've mentioned before, there's a lot going on here, a lot of different plots, espionage plots, intelligence operations kind of layered over each other. You could start with like what is like kind of the day-to-day business, like let's say the least exciting part of the show would be the most exciting part of a normal person's week. And this is where we just, we start out, we just kind of get to see what the A crew at Pine Gap, like what they do. We talked about all the different jobs they have and how they're interrelated. We see them do several operations, like satellite tracking, missile tracking, location, gathering of intelligence over just all kinds of signals. I thought maybe we could talk just about like our favorite parts of the first operation we see them do, which is what's that? That's really just them observing the shooting down of a commercial plane by a vampire missile. Vampire missile, apparently that's just jargon for any hostile guided missile. It's not a particular like type or anything like that. The big scary part about this missile is that's a separate one. It's a later one that is possibly in range to hit the President of the United States and the Australian Prime Minister.
Well, I think this aircraft hit is what led the investigation to find out where these might have come from. And that's when they found that guy that had like 3 missiles or 4 missiles in the back of a truck, and that's when Gus decided to take the shot and take him out, because those missiles were in range of POTUS and the PM.
Right, and that comes later. But this first one, did you like this part of the show? Did you like watching these people at work?
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. That hit on the civilian aircraft is actually what kind of sets the story in motion, and the bigger story behind the event kind of unfolds over the next 4 or 5 or 6 episodes. But they took this as an opportunity to kind of set the tone and the atmosphere of, I guess, the floor where all the different, intelligence gathering professionals are putting the pieces together to make the decisions. So it was cool to kind of watch them work, which is what this scene was for. Was really just to set an atmosphere and a tone, and then like trigger the suspense that goes on for like the rest of the series.
Right. Some things I liked about it. I liked the fact that the satellite was able to pick up a video signal from the missile, so they could see what the missile could see. They couldn't see what was around it, but kind of like a forward-mounted camera. That was interesting. In the follow-up, obviously, like I think as soon as the missile shows up on their radar, so to speak, Comment is definitely like furiously like trying to listen into all the comment traffic, and trying to figure out like who's talking, who's saying anything about, shoot the plane now or something like that.
Right.
And then of course they're also having her, that's Yasmina, do the same thing in the follow-up investigation as they're trying to figure out who fired the missile and why. Later in the series too, just following up on comment, I like that someone suggested, there's a certain text message that they're trying to figure out who sent it, and the suggestion is to get a comment expert analyze the text message and to maybe find someone that knows the people that are under suspicion well enough to get something from the text, just from like the way they spelled tomorrow, which in the text is spelled like tomorrow. Do you know anybody that spells tomorrow like that? Or maybe even just the way they use a colon. Do you remember that's how they got Kaczynski?
Yeah. Well, the brother turned him in, but yeah, the manifesto was published by the newspapers specifically because they couldn't find Kaczynski whatsoever, and they were figuring if they published the manifesto, somebody somewhere is going to spot something. And when the wife convinced the brother to read the manifesto and he read it, like his jaw dropped and was like, yeah, this is my brother.
Right.
Yeah. And we have all these like idiosyncrasies in our language. Each one of us has like our own personal language, the way we say things, especially when we write or type things, just the way we put things out, that all kinds of weird linguists or professional linguists and language experts will pick up on.
Yeah, so I like to give plus spy points to that. Little minus spy points, though. When that suggestion is made, someone says, well, that's a problem because our best comment is Yasmina, and she's also on the suspicion list. First of all, she has only just been there for a few weeks, so I'm not sure it super makes sense that she's, the best. Maybe she's been doing this job for a long time, but, she just recently got promoted to Pine Gap. And second, hey, okay, yeah, so you don't have the best, even if she is the best, just maybe find the second best. She's not the only comment person you have on the base, I assume.
Right.
There's a lot I like about the, it's a lot of it is just kind of jargony stuff and stuff you see on screens. You just kind of nod and say, well, that looks realistic, sounds realistic. But some of it really does resonate with stuff that I've heard or read. I wanted to key in on my personal favorite, which is where Moses is going back through the records and finding like a launch of a missile of a similar type in the same area from 17 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then that prompts Gus to have comment go back through the comment logs from that time period. And, what I just really like about this is, me being like, for instance, kind of definitely from a quality assurance background. And, that's also an investigative kind of discipline. And, we keep all these reports, we write daily reports on what was observed in the software, have those as a resource so that when something, an anomalous event occurs, that's of really high concern, we have a vast amount of data that we can go back through in terms of like our bug database and also our lead tester reports that we can try to correlate it with similar stuff. So kudos to them for, displaying some smart analysis type stuff. Actually going back through that old data is going to make my best number 3 tradecraft for the series.
It's definitely a pretty good one. I really appreciated all of the detail they put into like everybody's job. And especially, I think they used some facial recognition in spotting some of them. And what I liked is they were talking about percentage matches rather than like, yeah, that's our guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is like a nice prelude to the counterintelligence that we were talking about with Francis, where, even if things look like it's what you're looking for, it might not. So, being careful to, go through the process, eliminate all of your personal filters, and just, I think the show did a really good job of that.
Yeah, I hope that the accuracy of satellite-based facial recognition is significantly less advanced than what we see in this show. It's true that China claims that they can ID someone in 30 seconds flat, get a positive ID from satellite, like from the moment you walk out of your house, which could be propaganda because it's definitely, like, even if it wasn't true, it's definitely in their interest to have their population believe that it's true.
Right.
But I guess the highest accuracy we see in the show, they get an 85% match on a guy within, like, I don't know, 5 seconds, which I really hope that's implausible. I really do.
Right.
Um, Even if like something I would believe is, like, maybe, like, if you have the image and you run it through like a heavy duty computer for like 3 hours, maybe it can come back and kind of give you a, I don't know, 50%. But 85% in 5 seconds, I don't, like I said, I don't know. I just, it would
Yeah.
it would terrify me. I understand it's a TV show. You've got a certain amount of budget. We only ever see a crew in the show, which means that basically when they go home at night, like, nothing happens. It's like nobody's working on the case. But actually, there are. It's referenced in the show. There are 3 other shifts, and so what we should be seeing in a more realistic show with a bigger budget would be, they come in the morning and conference with the leaders of the other 3 teams, check through their reports. What did you guys find overnight?
Right. Yeah, presumably it's not just one shift doing all the work on one case. Presumably the other shifts are like up to speed on what's current and what's I guess critical for that time period, I guess.
Yeah. Now we're gonna find out the plane was shot down to keep hush hush on some talks that are going on between Australia and China that they don't want the U.S. to know about.
Basically, a journalist had discovered something that would severely damage the relationship between the U.S. and Australia, which is basically that China's negotiations in trade also involved a treaty of neutrality if anything happened between China and the U.S. Just to make things much more exacerbated, considering that during our Pine Gap scenes, there's an active conflict going on between, well, I guess not conflict, but some close calls where they're taking shots at each other and, drawing lines and, you did this, so we're going to do that. And they're on the brink of a war. And so we discover later that it was Australia that probably, or someone in somewhere in place in the Australian government made the call to take out the plane so that it wouldn't damage their relationship with the U.S., which makes for the story to be even more on your seat because every little second counts. And the interaction between Hath and Ethan, and Ethan's the kind of U.S. head honcho on Pine Gap. They're both withholding information from each other because they're from different countries and, different security clearances from their government agencies. And so there's kind of like a nice relationship between them where they have to decide how long they're just going to start holding secrets or if they're going to start working together. I thought it was really well played out.
Sure. So Aces freaks out, and we don't, a lot of this stuff we just kind of see partial information, but as we'll find out later or be able to figure out later, Aces freaks out about this, and they want Gus taken off of the floor or at least out of the mission director chair, because they don't want him to find out who fired the missile. Ethan doesn't like that, of course,
Right.
because he's Team
And neither
America.
does Gus.
Right. But later there's the part where the Gus calls in the drone strike to stop the missile that they think potentially could be aimed at the prime minister and the president. Even though I agree, Ethan agrees, I think you do as well, that it's the right call. I mean, I'm kind of 100% sure it's the right call, especially because you get the confirmation from a comment. She says like there's a huge spike about talking about like the security, around the talks, like right as that missile's being fired. He definitely makes the good call, but because it's maybe looks fishy internationally, it gives her like the extra ammunition to go ahead and force Gus not entirely off the floor, but out of the mission director chair. Plus 5 points for that.
Yeah, it was really a good kind of cover. Even though everybody was like, what the fuck? He made the right decision. Just because of the sensitivity, I guess, diplomatically and politically, it really it really helped provide the decoy for bringing in a replacement who would be more involved and supporting Australians' interests in the China talks.
Right, and the replacement they bring in is Kath's husband, who it's never made entirely clear to me how fully read in he is on like why he's being brought in. I mean, if job number one is to make sure this investigation of the shooting down of the plane doesn't go anywhere, letting him know might be a good idea. There was some point in the show where Kath says kind of dismissively to him, like you're just a guy who has a friend in ACO, which is like the FBI. But he was Acis's direct pick for the job. And later in the show, he claims to Kath, when they definitely don't let him in on the werewolf game. They don't let him in on the fact that there's also a traitor in the mix and a computer virus. And he gets really pissed off that they didn't tell him about that. But then
this was like the best part, I think, storytelling wise too, because there's like several layers, and I think that's what really drove the suspense of the whole story. Not only do you have the head bumping between U.S. and Australia in Pine Gap, you also have the American-China relations, overseas going on, like on the geopolitical spectrum or stage, and on top of that, there's a mole, there's a leak. So we're watching like several different stories going on top of the natives of the area by Pine Gap. They have their interests that they're looking out for in trying to get this big, deal with China for oil going on. It was really, really well executed because there's a lot going on, and it's not confusing to keep track of. Like, they definitely did a good job of helping you follow along with the story.
Yeah, like at no point was I really confused at all. I like the show for that reason. Sometimes, like, especially something this complicated, like in some movies, I can get lost pretty easily. But in this one,
Right.
I always felt like I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't know.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. They definitely did a great job of not confusing the audience, but still having like a bit of a mystery to where, like, well, who did it? Who's the leak?
Right.
Yeah.
And what does one thing have to do with the other? Like, what does the virus have anything to do with the missile? Does the does the fact that there's a trader have anything to do with the fact that the Chinese are trying to do a land development deal? You have all these different games being played, and you're wondering like which ones are going to link up to each other in which ways. Pretty cool. Like in a movie, like really, like any one of these plots could have been the whole story.
Yeah.
But that's the benefit of having a nice six episode thing too. And you know what? I appreciated that it was 6 episodes as well, because I kind of wanted. I did like. I wouldn't have liked this as like a pure ongoing series, like full season of television, because then I would have felt like, okay, they're just gonna keep throwing stuff at me and constantly confusing me, and new weird stuff is gonna happen. At 6, knowing that the conclusion is 6 episodes away, made me feel comfortable that like I can keep up with this, I can figure this out. On top of the Australian Chinese missile plot kind of stuff going on, we do have like this extra wrinkle, like it's always like piling on, it gets worse. When Moses figures out that somebody's planted a virus in the Pine Gap computer systems, and he first got clued onto that by noticing that the virus went in and tested its capabilities by lowering the temperature by fucking with the thermostat, which I think is -5 points for the virus. What do you think?
Well, it had to do something to see if it would get noticed or not. And I guess there's some internal or like automatic, like, firewall alerts. And I guess that's what it was looking for. It didn't think that there'd be like, a super human Moses type that
Right.
would like spot like this slight change in temperature, because it wasn't like a big change. It was just kind of a slight change. And so I guess it's kind of -5 points for doing anything, but I guess it was just testing the perimeter.
Yeah, it seems like an unnecessary risk to me. It's like if you get into the bank vault, you don't first test to see if you can take $10 out of there.
Right.
You grab the money and run.
Right.
Now, Pine Gap is air gapped, of course. So it has to be, that's how for sure that it has to be like an inside job. A human being has to plug in a USB or something, or maybe use, I guess, no, if it's air gapped, you wouldn't be able to communicate to it with a cell phone, even though later though someone does, right? Aren't we led to believe that someone downloaded what the virus uploaded using a cell phone?
Right.
If
And
they're
it had
really
to be within like so many yards, and it was LOEs that were told at the end. And I think you were kind of concerned, like, why is anybody using cell phones? Or like, why not just block the signal or not have any cell towers?
Oh yeah, that's my number one thing. Like, because first of all, yeah, nobody should have a cell phone anywhere near the Pine Gap. Like, they should be collecting them before they get on the bus. That long bus ride that they have to take from town.
Right.
But you made the point. Well, someone could smuggle one in. Over time, familiarity leads to maybe more lax security than otherwise. But then my solution to that is just don't have any cell phone towers anywhere near here.
Well, there would have been the neighboring cities, presumably, right?
Yeah, but it feels like that's a pretty long bus ride that they take from the town.
That's
like,
true.
It feels like the place is isolated enough. I feel that, you could just say no cell phone towers. I can't be sure if that's an oversight on the script or not. I mean, there's certain things that if I quibble about, like, it makes it much, much, much more difficult for them to tell this story. So, maybe they're taking a shortcut or two. When they find out about the virus. Now, Ethan briefs Langley, of course, but he doesn't tell Kath that he does that. And Langley agrees that they'll keep it quiet and let him handle it. That feels a little fishy to me. In fact, like I feel like it's maybe minus 5 points that they try to do everything in house. I feel like finding out about the virus, like you just pull out all the stops and pull everyone that is on their suspect list like off the floor like pronto. I feel like the virus, I mean, the reason I guess that you play it quiet and play it in house is because you're like, well, we don't want the traitor to know that we're onto him. We don't want the werewolf to know that we even suspect there is a werewolf,
right?
Because then they'll cover their tracks. I personally just think the virus feels to me like such an amazingly imminent and massively problematic threat that it overshadows taking a risk on not being able to find the traitor. I think you yank everybody out and fucking just go full, I don't know, full nuclear on the interrogation.
Well, that was Kath's husband's idea. Just fire everyone. Like, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right move, because they were able to narrow it down to 6 people, like in all certainty. It has to be one of these 6 people. And if you just remove the virus, it alerts, whoever planted the virus that the virus has been found, and now you lose the leak, and the leak is still working. So I think Kath's husband was like, yeah, just get rid of everybody, transfer them or fire them or whatever. But now you have a potential leak, off somewhere else, and you still have no idea who it is, and they could do more damage. I think a person could probably do more damage than, a virus like that could. And that's why it was time sensitive when Ethan meets with the woman from Langley. Like, I think they only have a week to figure it out, or they're just going to eliminate the virus. I guess.
Did she give him a period of time?
Yeah, because they were like, we have like towards the end of the series, they're like, oh, we got 1 day left. Of course, it's at the like last minute that they figure everything out. Like a typical thriller. But yeah, I think there was an ultimatum. You got to get it done by this time, or we're just gonna, pull it out and, deal with it then.
How about this? Ethan sets up a system to identify who's using the collections room terminal with the malware, because that's how they narrowed down their list of suspects. They know where and how it was uploaded. It was a modified video card, which, as some people mentioned on Reddit, could point to someone with imint experience.
Right.
And I genuinely love Moses',
which would be Eloise, right?
Uh-huh.
She was Emmett. Yeah.
And I genuinely loved not so much. I mean, I liked Ethan's idea of like, well, wait, would there be a system restore backup point for when the video card was installed? And I liked that, but what I loved was Moses' reaction. He was just like, I salute you, sir.
Right. That was cool.
But Ethan sets up a system to identify. Wait, do I have this right? He can identify if someone is, I guess, interacting with the virus software, something like that. Mm-hmm. But to track that usage, he sets it up so that signal will just go to a tablet that he's got, which didn't make sense to me, because that gives them the limitation. I mean, it gives us a story limitation that makes sense, that like someone's going to have to be with the tablet at all times to track the usage. And that's going to be either him or Kath or Rudy. Rudy's the guy that we think is CIA. And Ethan would be probably NSA or NRO. I'm going to go with that as my number 3 worst tradecraft. I think it was just done for plot reasons. I don't think there's any reason you can't just have that, set it up so that it just sends you an email.
Yeah, that or someone would have to have some kind of login, right? That was kind of confusing too. Like, how come usually like systems like this that are set up, everyone has their own login and their own password that only they know, so that when you log in, you're the only one that. Well, I guess maybe through the hardware they could skip through that. I don't know, but yeah,
It's
I
another
agree.
it's another hole in the idea that Pine Gap is truly air gapped as well. Like I mentioned before, someone seems to have interacted with the virus software using a cell phone. Here, Ethan's flashing around a tablet that he says, the computer will notify me through here. Well, the computer's just not supposed to have, like, there's not supposed to be any modems or any Bluetooth wireless connections like installed at all. That's what air gapped means.
Mhm.
I guess they could have, as far as the cell phone thing, I mean, I guess potentially a very sophisticated trader could install a Bluetooth transmitter, I guess, as part of their chicanery. And then it was also weird that, like, when the virus did kick in, that it uploaded this particular file. The file it uploads is the one where of the, like, basically the, I don't know, the mission room
It was pretty
CC.
much the audio of the floor when Gus made the call to take out that one guy that had the missiles that was in range of POTUS and the Prime Minister. So it kind of made things look bad that, oh, America's just taking out targets or whatever, and that leak kind of damaged some things. But
I mean,
yeah, it just happened to be that video.
we're given to believe because Moses, he gets there and it looks like the virus is trying to upload like a lot more information than just that. But that's
Yeah, it tries to upload everything, and then Moses gets in to stop everything.
right.
And just one file slips through, and it happens to be that file.
And the fact that it just happens to be that file doesn't seem to make sense from just a strictly, spy points analysis kind of thing, even though obviously it fits very nicely with the story. So we'll give it a little minus 5 points for that. Bigger fish than that, personally, that file, that audio file, does get leaked to the press. This is my number 2 worst tradecraft. I don't think that leak in and of itself is valuable enough to threaten the ignorance of Pine Gap staff about the existence of the virus. I mean, I guess they could. Once they see that go live on television, they know someone got it out somehow. I guess
Right.
it wouldn't. I guess it wouldn't necessarily clue them in that there's a virus, but just cluing them in that there's any kind of leak. When you imagine the amount of intel that you could get from this fucking virus,
Right.
that, like, it's so valuable. Like, you wouldn't leak anything. I think maybe I'm going to switch my number 2 and my number 1 worst. I think this is because I feel more confident about this one.
Well, that's why they threw Eloise under the bus, I think. Because now, if they still think Pine Gap is unaware of the virus and the leak being Eloise is identified, they might just think she's the leak and there is no virus. Like, you're right. Presumably, they would run an investigation and figure out how she got it out, and that would clue them into the virus.
The funny thing is, you got to remember that we as the audience know that the Pine Gap staff is alert to the existence of the virus, but the Chinese don't have any reason to know that.
Right.
So as far as they're concerned, like, the virus is completely safe. I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, so I guess we're going to the ending part. You said, throw Eloise under the bus. I finally came to the conclusion. I think that the ending of the show is actually vague. I still think it could I think it could have been Eloise, and I think it could have been someone else. If it's not Eloise, then yeah, it's the Chinese thinking like it would be good for Pine Gap to think that she got this bit of footage out to them still, and it goes back to my thing about like this, it's just not valuable enough. It's just not valuable enough even to burn an asset, or even to, you know, throw a whatchamacallit, a patsy
right
in there.
Well, I mean, I went back and looked at the cafeteria scene, and there is a like nanosecond shot of Eloise in front of the microwave. So I think the show wants to confirm that it's her, but I think what you're saying is, why even alert Pine Gap that there is a leak over something like that video?
Because I'm not sure what they. I mean, I get it that the video does. It's a blemish on Americans' reputation.
Right.
It is evidence, possibly, you know, or at least some people take it as evidence that the Americans and the Australians aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye on everything. Because part of the video is you hear an Australian intelligence operation person saying, we don't have enough information to do this. And you hear the American guy say, well, I'm doing it anyway.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, really, they did a good job. Remember the movie Clue, where there were like 3 alternate endings?
Mm-hmm.
And, well, of course you do. You love that movie, right?
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite movies.
Cool. And I feel like Pine Gap also could have had like multiple, like by the end of even when you get to the last, you know, few minutes of episode 6, I feel like you could have thrown in several different endings. All of them could have fit the facts of what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the show never directly confirms Eloise's guilt or ignorance. Although, I mean, there's definitely clues. I mean, one of the big ones to me is when Moses is complimenting the genius of like whoever installed this virus. Like, I never would have thought of that. Mm-hmm. She really like kind of gushes, or, you know, like she just says, that's amazing. Like, that's, you know, that's incredible. And she just like kind of looks like she's breaking cover a little bit in just how like pleased with herself she feels. And like you and Francis had said, you guys are seeing a romantic longing for Moses's approval in her. And so hearing him say that and watching her reaction, I mean, it's like circumstantial. I don't think we get anything damning.
Mm-hmm.
But everything would make sense. I still think you could come back, like, you know, like if you were going to do season 2 of Pine Gap, like keep that wound open, you know, keep the audience guessing, you know, keep Eloise as a character in custody, continue to develop the other characters, and just keep that ball in the air. Was it really you, Eloise? I mean, yeah, it could have been, or maybe not. Let's look at this too. Let's hear your thoughts on the werewolf game. This is Once You Know It, Trader is in your midst. Well, it's interesting because it is a werewolf game, but the werewolf in this case has no reason to believe, at least that we know of, that they're being targeted.
Right. They think everything's looking good. Other than, I think there's a couple shots, like after the second and third time that I watched it, that Eloise might be concerned that Moses has figured something out based on his behaviors, which is why I think she ends up throwing so much shade on him. Like, it could be that she's into him and then she gets like jealous and then just throws shade on him. Or it could be that she might have picked up on some things from some of the shots previously and is like, who's an easy target to kind of throw this on? And I actually marked that as my number 3 best tradecraft, was how Eloise really threw a lot of shade on Moses. She came to Rudy, who's actually running the investigation, and I wanted to point out Rudy's counterintelligence game as my number 2 best tradecraft. mainly because, I think we discussed this with Francis, how he just goes through the process. Every single candidate for who the leak is very believable. They all have a motive. It all kind of fits in the way that they set it up as far as motives go and what they did and where they were. And so I liked how Rudy, even though that he kind of guessed Eloise from the start, he still went through the process to make sure that it wasn't just some random, thought or belief that he had about himself. And he kind of eliminated his identity and his filters, and his ego, and just walked through the process again and made sure to collect evidence to show one way or another. And, in an investigation, it's all about eliminating suspects. And that's pretty much a lot of the process he went through. So that's why those made my number 2 and my number 3 best tradecraft, was just Eloise's werewolf game and throwing shade on Moses, and then Rudy's, counterintelligence game and trying to identify the leak.
Yeah, he's got a very difficult decision to make when he's tasked by Ethan to find out who were the people, who should be on the suspect list, because based on the information they have, Rudy should be on that list along with the other people. He has to make a really tough call there, because he knows that he has more experience in, well, obviously he says to himself, well, I'm not the mole. And if I put myself on this list, they're going to have to consider me a suspect, and they're not going to clue me in on the investigation. The problem with this is I am the best equipped and have the most experience in running this kind of investigation. So he conceals that information, which I thought was interesting to consider as, loving talking about the werewolf game. You have that character, the seer, in werewolf games that can, kind of every night confirm or deny. Like they have an enhanced power of werewolf detection. The most important thing that the seer must do in a werewolf game is not fall under suspicion of being a werewolf, or not let the werewolves have any idea. Also, not let the werewolves have any idea that they, are that valuable of a piece. I just kind of like the analogy, like Rudy. It is important. It was the right call for him, for sure, to keep himself off the list. Yeah.
Well, I like the werewolf analogies, and when we talk about these movies, because a lot of it fits, because there's a lot of uncertainty, and you're trying to identify certain pieces of information or certain leaks or something like that. So I think it works well, and I think you pointing out that he's kind of like the seer role is great, especially like for anybody that's played werewolf. The seer always looks like a werewolf. So like really veteran seers know how to not look like that and get lynched the first night or something.
I did notice too, though, again, I just think it's something they kind of forgot, and it wasn't even that important to the story that Yasmina just showed up a few weeks ago. But there were some problems with that. One of which I thought, including that, I thought just that fact should have made her just be bumped up to the top of the list, right? The virus showed up a couple weeks ago. She showed up a couple weeks ago. I think it's -5 points that nobody even mentions like that, as a connection that they should be focusing on.
Well, Rudy did point out how easy it was her to climb the ranks. It was almost like she was groomed to get into intelligence, and considering her childhood, I think her parents were killed in a conflict, so her motive would have been more ideological, and since she's kind of been working towards this goal pretty much her entire life, it put her suspect. But yeah, I don't think she was as big of a priority as she should have been, like you pointed out.
But the counter to that is that a very smart werewolf could have, and I think totally would have, used that as an opportunity to plant the virus, because it would make Yasmina a prime suspect. You might have been sitting there waiting with the virus, ready to go, and just, but it would be really smart to wait until a new person has transferred into the facility and plant the virus around that time, because that is just an extra layer of protection. And yeah, that's definitely plus 5 points for me. Even though they don't say that's what happened, it fits the facts sufficiently to me to give it some points.
Right. We did talk about how well the show kind of made it believable that it could have been any one of the six. And by the way, that guy that had the kids in the private school, his name was Simon.
Right.
And the reason why is because I'm reading our notes. My number 3 was tradecraft. As far as red herrings go, and I discussed this a little bit, but why he sold the video of the American president saying terrible things about the prime minister, I don't know how he would think he wouldn't get caught. You're working in one of these top-notch, facilities where they're listening in on communications and signals and using satellites, and they can pretty much see everything, and somehow he thinks he's going to get away with it. And then he shows up and he's like giving people muffins when the show already established he doesn't buy people coffee. He brings lunch to work every day. You know what I mean? It was like the worst decision he could have made, which is what really eliminated him as a suspect for being the leak for me. I guess on the surface, if you're not really paying attention and you just kind of along for the ride, you'd be like, oh, it's got to be him. He's the one. But just the fact that he was so like lackluster about everything after breaking a severe rule that he was very well aware of, and just was like, oh, I'm sorry, I just needed the money. It wasn't that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. I'm definitely marking that as my number 3 worst tradecraft.
I don't know why it's only coming into my head right now, but is there a reason that doesn't just immediately make him suspect number fucking 1 on being the person that planted the virus?
Well, that's why they pulled him in and interrogated him after they discovered it was him that sent the video. But from the questioning, they were able to determine that, this was like a separate situation, which is another thing I really, really liked about the show. Like, it's like, I think, in a typical movie, it would have been like, it's you, and we would have gone on some other storyline. It must be you. If you would sell this video, then you were probably the leak. Haha, we got him, But, from their questioning and his responses, they were able to determine, like, no, he's just kind of like a bungling idiot that seemed to think that he was better than the systems that were in place and made like a really big mistake. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that's why they brought him in immediately, and that was their main concern, which they didn't let him. What I really liked about that interrogation was they didn't even let him know that there was a leak. They didn't let him know until like the last episode when they needed him to help identify who sent the text.
Oh, and even then, right. And even then, I don't think they tell him anything that they don't need to.
Right. They're very careful about how much information they let out about the investigation, which major plus spy points.
So looming in the background of the entire show, we've got the on the floor activities. We've got the normal. I don't know what else to call them except the day-to-day operations of Pine Gap, even though like the day-to-day stuff is definitely like off the scale. But like layered on top of this, you've got this Australian-Chinese conspiracy. Layered on top of that, you've got a traitor inside that's planted a very dangerous virus. Just kind of haunting the show in the background is the Chinese land deal. Mm-hmm. And the very last scene of the show is Chinese guy, winking, practically fist bumping Emmy.
Right.
Who's the native girl who definitely wanted the Chinese deal to go through. In fact, she would really like to see the Americans go out. She's fairly, she's not necessarily politically anti-American. She's anti-Americans being on our fucking land.
Well, I think she's completely against Pine Gap to begin with. And I think there was a line from her when the dad was like, "It's not all about money," and she was like, "Well, at least China's offering to pay," versus Pine Gap just like, you know, showed up and took over the land. Um, yeah, like you're definitely right. They definitely built her up as like a very uh, angry character, but putting on the happy mask of, yeah, I'll take you out for a tour and teach you about culture and stuff.
Again, I have to say, I don't think the leak. I question the value of the leak to anyone, really. But if you are gonna leak it and cover your tracks, I do think my number one best tradecraft, and it's really good, is to route the leak through someone that can be found, that's not an intelligence operative, that doesn't have at least discernible uh, Chinese political motivations to have made the leak. Um, I'm a CIA guy. I've got some information. I want it leaked to the press. Instead of me leaking it to the press, well, I could give it to some random stranger on the street and have him leak it to the press. But when the
Mhm.
investigation finds that random stranger, they're going to be super suspicious. Well, what if I don't find a random stranger? I find someone else that has an entirely different motive for the leak, that is not only not traceable or connectable to me, but also like dead ends the investigation because it makes sense and it's not
Mhm.
illegal for them to do it.
Right.
That's my number one best. Even though, like I say, like the leak, it's weird. Why? What does Emmy think she's getting out of this? I also don't see how the leak helps seal the deal, but I think that's what the show is implying. Um, but and that really bothered me to the point where I thought about it hard enough that at least I finally realized it's not 100% important for logical consistency that the leak actually sealed the deal. It's only important for Chinese guy for Emmy to believe that it would seal the deal in order to get her cooperation. You
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
okay? Did you follow me on that?
Yeah. Well, I think this is why it would have been great to get a season two, especially with that little wink at the end, because we actually get to see how much Emmy's involved. And if she's given a smirk like that, I think she might be more involved just from a basic film storytelling wise than just like a hapless individual. Even though that's kind of how she played getting the video and publishing it. Um, but no, you're right. I like the distance being created between China and the leak through Emi, and she's probably being used by Chinese Jalen. And he's a great character too, because he's kind of like on the surface putting on this like, I'm just a businessman, I'm just a technicals guy, but it's just like there's all these like looming moments with him that kind of like build up towards his end shot with Emmy that like imply that he's behind a lot of this, especially with like the seduction of Ethan's wife. And Ethan's the honcho of the U.S. side of Pine Gap, which I wanted to mark. We didn't really get to talk too much about him, but I wanted to mark it as my number one best tradecraft was Jiaolin seducing Ethan's wife. And I also wanted to mark it as my number one worst tradecraft that Ethan was completely ignoring his wife, because that would be the first place I would try and go if I'm trying to break through a very secure area that's pretty much impenetrable. I'd be, looking for like a lonely wife that's not happy with where they're living and is just kind of by herself. I mean, I don't know if I personally could pull it off, but that would. I mean, I guess that's kind of like penetration 101 is like looking for those weak links, and the show really really like played that up well.
Yeah,
So that's another reason why I wanted a season two, because I wanted to see like the fruits of that labor get pulled, and we didn't get to see that in this season.
the show's really good at giving characters plausible deniability on their actions.
Right.
I mean, the story working in their behalf, but it's also, you know, the characters being smart. Whereas like we never get, I mean, we just, it's at the end, like it's still all like circumstantial, but it does paint a compelling picture. But we never got like de facto proof that he's like that he's working with Chinese intelligence. Well, I guess he has to be, because he wants that file out, and you know the file has to have been given to him by whoever, probably Elise.
Right.
But not 100% sure.
Agents, please report for debriefing on this operation. The director will see you now.
I really enjoyed it. We actually watched this because we were planning on bringing Francis on as a guest, and he recommended it. And I had never heard of it. But as soon as I started watching, I was just kind of pulled in from the moment it started. In fact, I binged it immediately and finished all 6 episodes back to back. So I think I'm going to give this a 5. Not only was it a fantastic story, but like all the it was actually pretty hard to find some bad tradecraft. And I just, there was a lot going on. And even if you're not really into spy movies, or if you have a friend that isn't, this would be something they would like, because it's not confusing at all. There is a lot of moving parts, but it all gets explained really well.
Yeah, I'm gonna 1,000% agree with you on that. It's complicated but clear,
right?
And even in its clarity, it still is smart enough written to leave threads open, you know, and maybe possibly be a little bit open to interpretation, but not in a way that, you know, there's a lot of endings at the end of the show that you would have said, okay, I get it.
Yeah, right.
Or I'm mostly certain I do, but not one where like there's an ending where you're like, okay, I need to watch this again to figure out what the hell just happened.
Right.
But I do consider it rewatchable, and I do think it's a pretty good. I think the genius here is I really do think people that are super into spy geeky stuff will enjoy it just as much as people that don't give a shit about that stuff, because like the human drama is pretty good, and things are explained and without a lot of heavy exposition either.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end I'm going to keep it cool with a 4.
Any reasons why? Was there something missing?
I don't think there's anything missing. I just think there just might be like not quite the exact. I mean, I gave a 4 to Day of the Jackal. I love that. Like, you know, my 5 territory goes up into just, you know, just some specialized stuff that just really like jack me off. My 5s are, you know, Garrick, the Deep Space Nine, because I love Star Trek, and it's my favorite. He's my favorite character in my favorite Star Trek series. Right. Maybe I was a little too hot on Ronan, but there was a time in my life when it was definitely a 5. And, you know, I'm a super huge Jason Bourne guy, you know, I just can't get to 5 with Pine Gap, but you know, hopefully, I mean, I think a 4 is pretty respectable, you know,
right.
not throwing shade on this show. And,
right.
And I feel like it's nice. I can recommend it to anyone. I really can. And I did. I recommended it to all my family and stuff. I think my sister
I've been telling everybody about it.
Supposed to watch it.
Best and worst tradecraft. My number 3 best tradecraft was Eloise throwing shade on Moses. It was very well played for a very solid werewolf. My number 2 best tradecraft was Rudy's counterintelligence game. I really liked that, even though he had initial thoughts, he still went through the process. And my number 1 best tradecraft was Xiaolin seducing Ethan's wife. I think that was a good play to kind of get in on a high level.
My number 3 best, you know, is just kind of an example piece to kind of showcase and give kudos to the overall levels of like deep analysis that we see going on in the show, but especially just watching them trace back through old data to connect the dots of, well, what was going on 17 months ago from your desk? Okay, well, then in that case, if you found something, then over to you, what was going on 17 months ago on your desk? And if what you find there is going to tell us to look somewhere else, it's just great stuff. Number 2 best, I'm super with you. Rudy's play in the werewolf game. And number 1, routing the leak through Emmy is super smart. Over in the worst,
that's a good one.
Yeah, over in the worst tradecraft, okay, that tablet thing. And the my questions about this air gap stuff, like it's a little messy. But the tablet, like the fact that for some reason it's not clear to me, like the only way Ethan can, get an alert that someone's fucking with the virus is like on this specific one tablet.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you even do that? And you can't do it in a way that it could separately send the message to all 3 of their tablets. Doesn't make sense. Number 2, that the leak was questionably valuable enough to, if you like, that virus is so fucking valuable. Like when you have access to that kind of information, you don't give the enemy any reason to suspect that you have it. Actually, I remember now. That's why I switched that and made that my number 1. And my original number 1 is coming back to number 2, and that's also relates to the strategic value of the virus, but as viewed from the opposite team. When they find out about the virus, I think it's a big enough threat that they should have been much more aggressive and not worried so much about spooking the trader, but just like shut that shit down.
Right. My number 3 worst tradecraft was Simon selling the video like he wouldn't get caught. Number 2 worst tradecraft was Yaz and Gus sharing secrets. It compromises them both. You know what I mean? For the story, it's really important because if they didn't, a lot of things wouldn't have played out the way they did. But it concerns me, especially if you're going to like be crossing different agencies and having a relationship. It should be kind of understood that there's some things you can't talk about. It puts them both kind of in danger professionally as well as, I don't know. I don't know that they should have gone through that. My number 1 worst tradecraft was Ethan ignoring his wife. I'm sure he's gone through some amount and has experience of who gets targeted and where enemy intelligence agencies would go after. So I would think that he would put a little bit more time, even though I know he's got a very important job.
I'm a little surprised they don't have people out there following Zhao Lin around.
I was thinking that too, and we didn't really get to talk about that. Yeah, you would think.
I mean,
especially
Ethan certainly sounded super suspicious of him.
Yeah, and he started following him himself to go like the driving range when he spotted him talking to the native guy about their plans. So clearly he was onto something. You would think that, what is it, ASIS?
Yeah,
would be on them. Yeah, you would think that they would have somebody watching them.
Yeah, or the CIA, because Ethan was like super nervous about Chinese Guyland deal,
Right, exactly. And, he could have said something to that woman from Langley, like, hey, you might want to get some tabs on this guy. Yeah, minus 5 points.
So here's my, so that gives me the idea for a movie, which I don't think we've seen yet. Like, in this movie, we'll basically take the characters we've got, like, Ethan. You get an Ethan character that's suspicious of like a foreign national kind of guy and is thinking like, this guy, could be a spy. He could be looking for some way to like, get into our secrets. And so what he does is he puts some guys on the case and they start following dude around. And when they come back to him, they've got a very interesting story to tell. They tell him, hey, you know what? You really might be right, because that guy is sleeping with your wife.
Right?
At which point you could, I mean, I think someone could make a really good script of that, because what do you do there? Do you immediately like confront your wife, or does it now become like a triple cat and mouse fucking game of like, keeping
Right.
secrets and trying to like out the dude, something like that. It'd be cool, right?
Yeah. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
I'd be very happy to see something like that.
If a movie like that exists, someone let us know, and we'll cover it on the show.
We'll add it to the never-ending list.
All right, let's get to park benches. Despite all the realism, I think that, like, I'll restate it, the single biggest knock on the show is how much different crap is happening all in the same week. Like, if you're gonna be really objective about it, like, it massively stretches disbelief, even though each of the individual stories I think is a 5. So that's the trick that I have to pull off this. What do you think? Do you think we knock it down for just having too much?
Well, I mean, despite a lot of the realism, I mean, I think in a real life crisis moment, I'm sure there's like ebbs and flows in how critical moments get. But I would think there's a lot of things going on when there's something big going on, like a trade negotiation. So I would presume something like a facility like this would have all kinds of stuff going on. I don't know if you're going to have. Well, yeah, I don't know. I presume this all would fall into place. There's probably a lot of moving parts often in this level of like intelligence, but I agree with you. I don't know that we could really give this a 5, just because I think there was some quibbles that we had.
Yeah, I also, I'm rethinking too, like, let's see. I think the virus is, and maybe this is just me, and we don't have to be in perfect agreement on these things, but, to me, the virus is a way bigger threat than the traitor. I'm in agreement with Kath's husband. Like, you should have burnt it all down and shut everything down until you rooted that fucking thing out and not take chances with it. And the leak, which seems so important to the characters, like, it just doesn't satisfy me at the end. Another thing to factor in, but I think here's like, there are those things, which those alone, I think, take it down to a 4.5. Those would take it down to a 4 if it was a simpler story. But we also have a thing where, like, we give our star ratings not just on quality of tradecraft that we see, but also quantity. There's certain shows or movies that we've, lowered it down. Like Argo is a good example. Argo, we have no complaints about the tradecraft in the movie. We just didn't get to see as much as we would have liked.
Yeah.
In here, we get to see, as much as we want.
Yeah.
And it's all pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So maybe between those, I don't know, I think it goes down to a 4 because of some of the questions, but then maybe just comes back to a 4.5 just because of just how much good shit there is.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with the 4.5 because there's so much that we're given. You can't knock them all out of the park and tell like such a riveting story that they did. So I think I feel comfortable at a 4.5 as well.
4.5 park benches for Pine Gap. Go see it.
And that's the end of our show. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at spies_like us. Visit us on our website at www.spieslikeus.net. You can find out about upcoming episodes. Also, what will really help us out is if you give us a review on wherever you found our podcast, either on iTunes or your Android app or YouTube or wherever you listen to us. Even if you didn't like the show, just give us a review. It'll help us, give us feedback so we can make the show better. And it can also help other people who haven't found the show yet find out about us. Hey Moira, initiate Protocol 9.
Protocol 9 initiated. This podcast will self-destruct in 20 seconds. The preceding transmission sampled the songs Ice Cold by Audionautix, Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net. Editing by Todd Hostetler.